Setting up your machine for .NET Core with Kathleen Dollard.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your humble host. Make sure to check out www.azuredevops.show for past episodes and show notes. And we are celebrating over a year going into 2020 with the Azure DevOps Podcast, talking about all things .NET and shipping your .NET software out to Azure and everything that it takes to do that. One quick announcement. In January, I'm teaching another class of my .NET DevOps Bootcamp, January 16th and 17th in Austin, Texas. And so sign up now to reserve your spot. You can check the show notes for information. And I'm really excited about today's show. My guest today is Kathleen Dollard. And she's a principal program manager at Microsoft, a longtime developer and national conference speaker, and also longtime friend. Kathleen, how are you?
Yeah, we've known each other for a long time. Yeah, I was an MVP for a long time, and so I got to know a lot of people, and I feel very lucky to be working at Microsoft and be able to work with all these old friends and try to make our world better for old friends and everybody else as well. So it's a great opportunity. I enjoy it.
Absolutely.
I've only been here for 2 years, which you know.
It seems like forever.
But your listeners wouldn't know that it's only been 2 years, little over 2 years that I've been at Microsoft. So yeah, it's been a good 2 years, but it has not been a long time yet. And I work with so many people that have been here for so long. I still feel so new even after 2 years here.
Right, a lot to absorb, I'm sure.
My son's at a startup, and he's been there for 2 years, and he's like senior person on his team. He doesn't work around anybody, and I'm like, well, there's one person who's come since I started.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, it's not. There's a few more than that, but yeah, it's because we're definitely hiring, but we're also have a lot of people with a tremendous well of experience, which is fantastic.
Right.
So yeah.
Now, your background, you've written magazine articles, spoken at countless conferences, and done language design, so many different things. But I'm sure there's probably a small handful of people listening who are maybe just getting to know you for the first time. Will you share a little bit about your journey in your career and how you've ended up working on the .NET Core team here at Microsoft?
Yeah, and we should start with the fact that if you don't, since you don't get a visual with this, that I'm not real young. We'll just say that I've been programming for a really long time, and I actually came up with the IBM PC, and that's kind of my career. Paralleled early days of that when we were still figuring out what to do with the thing, and there'd be the very first place I worked was actually Texaco Research in Port Arthur, Texas, and there was exactly 2 PCs allowed in the building, and that's allowed through the gate. And one of them was in HR because it could be completely isolated, and the other was in, we needed AutoCAD in one location, and the price to be able to do engineering work from AutoCAD, on a $3,000 machine and $2,000 worth of software was just so phenomenally cheap. And those were the only 2 when I very first started, and, teaching a bunch of I like to say older, but I'm like, boy, I'm getting their age now. But older people begin early in my career to type. That was that's the kind of stuff we were working from, because computers and all of that had been not useful, and in a typewriter isn't something that someone on a shop floor is going to use. And then moving through this whole, with I was a chemist at the time, and so we had a spectrometer that had a keyboard, and so this whole moving computers into our lives. It's been my career. And it's been a fantastic piece of history to watch and play my role in. And so I really feel lucky. I look at people today and I think, oh, you're so lucky to be born at this moment in time. But I also look at my career and go, I was very lucky to be born at that moment in time. So, yeah.
And more to come.
Yes.
But, just from knowing you for so long, there's not a lot of people that I know, and not a lot of people in this industry who I would classify in the small circle of language experts, which I consider you as well.
So yes, I was a language. I'm still consider myself almost an amateur at language design. And just to let your audience know, I wear a number of hats at Microsoft, and the word principal means that I work on more than just one thing. I'm not focused. So I work on the .NET Core CLI and SDK, which we'll probably talk about. But I also work on C#. We can talk some about that. I'm the Visual Basic Program Manager, and also dropped in my lap, just plump in my lap about a year ago, is MS Build. And so, I have all these, and so, once you hear that, people are imagining programming, and I do not program on any of that. They don't let me touch anything. I did one big piece of programming on my side project, which is part of, we hope be in the BCL at some point. But I did one big bunch of work. And when I say that they threw it all away, it sounds like they were mean. And it wasn't. It was just that doing that work and showing how bad that code was going to be caused a redesign of the core system, and wound up with the work that I was doing no longer making any sense. It moved things around. And we can talk some about that too. As the system, I'm going to make a note here that we can talk about system command line if we get a few minutes to do that, because I'm super proud of my side project, and I'm really happy to talk about that as well. So
absolutely.
So we had all sorts of things to talk about in the end. Hopefully, our title will still make sense, but we're gonna have a good conversation.
Well, we're in the middle of this huge shift to .NET Core, and it was early, and .NET Core 1 obviously wasn't necessarily complete. But with .NET Core 3.1, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, it doesn't seem like anything's missing. It seems like now you're not gonna hit a brick wall on anything, and now is the time to move, and that this is the new wave. Is that true from your perspective?
I think it is true, but let me put a little caveat on that, which is you said almost everything's there, and actually that's not really true. So there's things we're not planning on moving. So there's some WCF workloads we're not moving. Windows workflow will not be there. WebForms will not be there. Those are the ones that come to mind, but they're not. That's not complete. And there's a few things we don't quite have all the way worked out yet. The smaller things like app domains, we're working out solutions for, but that's because of differences between the platforms. We also looked at the investments in some of the older technologies. For example, WebForms. And, WebForms is a very useful technology in some ways, but primarily not because of its internal architecture, but because it provides a design surface. And that is very useful to people, and I completely understand that. But there's issues with its architecture that are quite profound, and I hope we fill the niche. We don't currently we currently have some things heading off in directions that could fill that niche, but they don't today, and I will acknowledge that. So I'm not going to go so far as you to say it's all there. I will say that I think we have pretty much the set that we're going to have. It's not that it's completely without, there's more work we're doing. So, for example, I mentioned that I'm the PM for Visual Basic, and we're behind on getting Visual Basic, onto .NET Core. We're still working on some things on that. The experience is not good enough. So we're not talking about an experience that frankly kind of stinks. And so until we get those things pulled together, which is across a lot of groups, and, just lots of little stuff that still has to be done. Now, people that are hardcore VB are writing WinForms and other types of apps in VB today. There's no blockers for the being able to get the technology shoehorned in. It's that Visual Basic in particular has a high bar for it just works. And when you have to think about things like, oh, well, I have to put this extra thing into my project file, and oh, that's not in the template. Oh, there's no templates. And, you start unraveling this, you just go, it's just not a VB experience. And so that's why right now we've been quiet about it. But I expect we're going to get that straightened out after the first of the year. And we will be primarily aiming Visual Basic at taking the folks that love it and moving them forward. We are not currently planning on doing a lot of expansion in terms of the language. Basically, Visual Basics had a lot of time to grow up, and it's a pretty darn good language the way it is. And we think it's valuable to have a language that doesn't have that ever-increasing surface area that C# has.
Sure.
So
right.
That's where we're currently coming on that. Yeah, I love language design. I work with language designers that are trained language designers, which I am not. And so when I sit down with language designers like Matt Torgerson or Annie Gaki or the engineers that have been on Roslyn since the beginning, I am easily overwhelmed. But it is fun to be part of that, and I am part of the language design team. So yeah.
You make a great point about Visual Basic having the cultural expectation of it just works.
Yeah.
I don't have to twiddle all the bits. And there's still, working with a client last week, there's so many classic ASP applications still out there that have not been migrated. Yeah. And you think, well, shoot, it'd be natural to move those over to Razor pages with VB from VB script.
Well, VB will not have Razor. So this is a decision that was made and would be, I know a lot of people want us to reverse it, but it would be exceedingly expensive and we don't expect to do it. So what you can do is have the parts of your application that have to do with the real stuff. You're actually doing calculations and you're getting stuff from the database and you're doing all that stuff. All that can be in VB. And then you can put your views and pages into C# in a separate project. So it is not smooth, and that is unfortunate. And it's why our sweet spot for VB will continue to be WinForms, as it always has been. Mm-hmm. So that's always been where most people were. And so that's where we're aiming our efforts.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good for people to know the different dichotomies, because growing up with .NET Framework, some of the big things were, okay, many languages, one CLR, and even the COBOL.NET compilers. Those are just amazing.
Well, we think about those still because we're not really aware. If anyone knows a language that's moved to .NET Core, I'd love to hear more about it. But we're not aware of a Fortran.core.net. We're not aware of that right now. Yeah. But we do like to think about it. And sometimes VB stands in for us not becoming a C# language. F# is so flexible and takes its own route so much. It's not quite such a good surrogate as VB is to say, we don't really want .NET and .NET. I mean, when I say .NET now, I mean .NET Core. We're working on our language there, and we're not for sure what it's going to be in 5. But we don't really want .NET to be C# only. That's still we still want to make it that you could bring other languages. The Roslyn compiler clearly still goes down to IL. The IL could be created from another source. That could be done it is done from F#. That's a completely independent compiler. Those compilers don't have to do all the fancy stuff. Roslyn does if they don't want to. Now, C++ is coming. So, we're working on that. And so there is, there's stuff happening, and I'm sure we have other stuff going on as well. But yeah, right. Those are our big languages.
Well, let's dive in. We're talking about .NET Core and setting up your machine and just getting into that world. What are the things that people need to think about?
Yeah. So, we did that as a title. That was my suggestion because, I want people to understand some things about setting your machine up. But for most people, most of the time, if they're using Visual Studio, you should just let Visual Studio manage everything for you. It's going to do a great job. And I'll come back around to some global.json for those people that know what that is and talk a little bit about that in Visual Studio. But then if you're using Visual Studio Code, if you just grab the latest SDK, we think you're best served with that because the latest SDK has all the bug fixes we've done, has the best performance that we've got. and it's got the new features as they come in. So those are new features in Roslyn, which you're going to know about because that's the new C# features and VB features, but C# right now. The new C# features, and you get excited about those. But we also have we also have new features in NuGet, and sometimes those can be significant in terms of the way things run behind the scenes. It includes a version of MS Build. So the actual bits that run your build update regularly, that's what you get in the latest SDK. And it also has tasks and targets, so the latest tasks and targets. And so all of that is in the latest version of the SDK. And so we think for most people, that's the right place to be. But we really messed this up, Jeffrey. We look back and we just go, we shake our head and we're so sad. So 2 years ago, it wasn't even that long ago, but 2 years ago, we were concerned that people were going to get confused about SDK numbers and runtime numbers. So we did this weird thing where we take exactly the same bits. They are the same bits. And we compile them against, I'll pick some numbers that I think will be correct and talk about 2.2.100 and 2.1.500, and then there's a framework version as well. So we take exactly the same bits and we compile them, and the framework version is in 15.9. Those numbers are 2017 update 9. I can do later numbers, but let's just do the ones I know I could get right. So we have the 15.9 framework version of, let's say, MS Build, and then we have we have exactly the same bits now compiled against the 2.1.NET Core runtime, and we call that 2.1.500, and we take exactly the same bits and we compile them against 2.2.100. And you're just shaking your head going, what are you doing? And it winds up with this insane downloads page that is just, you go to our downloads page, and if you want to get the latest, you just push the button. And then if you don't, you hit archives. Let's look at everything else. And then you go in there and you have to pick your what runtime version you're trying to target, which is kind of backwards. And then you go into that and you get all these releases. Because what happens then is that 15.9 is 2.1.500, 2.2.100. But then we come along with the next version, 16.0, and that is 2.1.600 and 2.2.200. Okay. So now you've got the same thing going on again with the next set of features for the SDK. And you're just like going, this is crazy. Don't talk to me anymore. I can see this, Everybody's going, please stop. And so we're doing that. We're trying to stop, which we are working very hard, but we have a high bar for ourselves for not just changing for change's sake. Our high bar is that we're going to change with an eye to all of the different scenarios people have for needing to get stuff and being able to support a variety of different scenarios. So, you think about it, we go all the way from with one thing and Terry's in often Azure DevOps land, where we're like totally managing a basically a build agent. Okay. And so Microsoft is like managing this build agent, all the way from that over to somebody who's finely tuning their build server and also including devs in multiple different editors running against so you look at all these different things. And so our commitment is that we're going to go slow enough that we're not going to just make it worse, but we are making steps. And I think it's worth pointing out a couple of things on that, partially because we made a bug. And I want to tell people how to get around our bug because it will affect people. So the first thing we did was we changed how we put the SDK into Visual Studio. We did that in 16.3. So Visual Studio 2019, Update 3, we started doing some things differently. And the big one people will notice is we stopped leaving SDKs behind on your machine. So if you were to go to the command line and type dotnet.net space -- list SDKs, I will not be your best friend because you'll go, what did you do? Because there'll be a lot of them. We've seen people that never used the command line that had like 26. And we're like, oh, that's lovely. And the reason they get to be so many is that every month, Visual Studio tells you to update.
And it's a new one.
A big part of that update is the Patch Tuesday runtime update we do to the .NET runtimes. And of course, that's, it just gets crazy. It's just totally insane. So starting with update 3 of 2019, we start taking off old versions if they were put on with Visual Studio. Now, I won't go into some of the technical changes we made because they were not trivial internally, but we now recognize whether something was put on with the SDK or Visual Studio. The same thing. And it's the same copy, but it's separately ref counted. So this is the way you expect a installer to work, and we now do that. But we have a couple of decisions around that people haven't been altogether happy with. And so there's a bug, and then there's something we did. So we took off 3.0.100, which is from the update 3, when you put on update 4. So update 4 has the SDK that's labeled 3.1.100, 3.1 instead of 3.0. Okay, so we put on this new one. You have the latest when you're ready to go with Visual Studio. But we took off the old one because Visual Studio isn't using it anymore. So we can take off 3.0.100. That's our path forward because it's right for almost everybody. But if you use global.json and you have pinned to 3.0.100, your build will fail because we took it off. And if you run into that, you just need to install it from the downloaded installer. And you can, in fact, do that at any point in time. You can do it before you update to 16.4, or you can do it after you update to 16.4. We ref count based on the way you installed, and so either one works just fine. But right now, and we're looking at ways to mitigate that some, but I don't think we'll reverse because we know there's a lot of people that did not want all those SDKs.
Sure.
And we really want to clean them up. So we're cleaning up SDKs. And if you think we're over cleaning up, I'm sorry, go install what you want, and we won't uninstall something. Visual Studio will not uninstall something that was installed via the downloaded SDK installer from the website. So there's that. And then along the way, we had a bug.
Okay.
And the bug is we're really sad about our bug, but the bug happened in 16.3 when we released Visual Studio 2019 update 3. It had a bug we didn't know about. So it's released. It's already out there. We can't pull it back. So people are going to just have this little quirk they're going to have to work with. And that is that if you're targeting Framework 3.0, we accidentally take that off of your machine with the update 4. Okay, so when you do 2019 update 4, we accidentally take the 3.0 runtime off your machine. And unfortunately, we didn't catch this because we caught this after after update 4 went out the door. So it's also broken in update 4. It's the same problem. It's already out there. With a bug, it's not a bug we can fix because that's where we made the mistake. And so all you need to do is run repair, not modify, not anything else, but just run a repair. And actually, no, I'm sorry, that's not right. That's not right. Run a modify, go into the individual components at the top, and click check the 3.0 runtime if you still need it.
And it'll add it back.
It'll add it back. Yep. And if you're not targeting that, it's fine. If you want to just target, 3.1 and target the latest, then it's fine. You've already got 3.1 on your machine. But
sure.
Yeah, so the thing is that we're really working on making this simple, but we did such a bad job of it initially that we're trying to crawl out of this morass that we made. And I've been part of some of these decisions. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just want to tell people that we know we can do better and we're working on it, but we're not going to race into a wrong decision. To get 2.1 and 2.2 out the door, we had we had to push a lot. And during that time, we made the decisions we needed to make. And from the view we had at the time, and we just didn't get our head around how complicated it was going to get and how many different ways we install. And there's so many layers of complexity here that I feel so bad when I go to our downloads pages and I go, oh my gosh, there's so many links. There's so many entries. It just, it's very sad. And in case anybody wonders how we get it right, all of that is driven from a metadata file because it passed a point humans could do those websites quite a while ago. It's all metadata. Yeah. Anyway, that's a big part of what I do is trying to figure out how to get that better. And I'm hoping that it will not be the rest of my life. I'm hoping we will get that done in the next year or two. And we're going to have in 5, I hope, a saner approach for people. That's the goal.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
Let's get through some announcements. The .NET DevOps Bootcamp training course, another date was announced for the course. We had a fantastic class in October, and next class will be January 16th and 17th in Austin, Texas. And this class is based on my latest book published through A Press, which you've heard about, .NET DevOps for Azure. And if you'd like to learn more about how to set up that high throughput DevOps environment for your team, get the copy of the book, .NET DevOps for Azure, anywhere tech books are sold. Also, as many of you know, I'm available for hire. I love helping teams get better. And one of our very popular services is a 30-point DevOps inspection covering everything from your version control structure through builds, testing, quality control steps, to deployments, and even production monitoring. And between now and Christmas, we are giving away a few of these for free. Now, the price for this is $5,000, and we provide a comprehensive report with concrete recommendations and a plan for resolving any gaps we see. So send me an email at jeffrey@clear-measure.com. That's JEFFREY. And once the promotion schedule is full, that's it. We're full. But if you're a regular subscriber, then you have a good chance of getting one of these promotional inspections. So send me an email, and until that promotion schedule is full, we'll give you a free 30-point DevOps inspection that we normally charge $5,000 for as a special promotion between now and Christmas. So I'll be looking out for those emails. And now back to the show. Well, that's some great insight into the inner workings. But you mentioned 2 different paths. One is if you're using Visual Studio 2019,
right,
and that experience, and then the other path of using Visual Studio Code, which I looked at Stack Overflow's developer survey for 2019, and Visual Studio Code in that survey takes the most popular top spot by a pretty wide margin across languages.
That's right. It's across languages. And I just think the Visual Studio Code has been such a fantastic thing. So when it first, set out, it's like, what are we doing? We're competing with this big product that's important to us, but it has brought so much to the table. It is not the rich IDE that Visual Studio is, but when you just want an editor, it's fantastic. It's fantastic across languages. It's my favorite Markdown editor. So, in addition to C# sometimes, I use it for almost all of my Markdown. It's got such a strong story for its extensions. There's so many great things there. So they did language services right because I had so much to learn from. So I love that. But if you're doing that, then you're going to be downloading your SDK and runtimes from the website. So you're going to just go there to get the latest. It's the button on the first page, and it says you want to build applications. You push the button, and it puts the right one on your machine. So that is pretty straightforward if you do it that way. And it's just, we wind up once we've don't have very many guardrails. And so we do wind up with places people can stub their toes. Like we put the x64 and x86 buttons right next to each other when you go to the archive page. Gosh, isn't that a good idea? Any place, we've got them. They're right next to each other, except don't click the wrong one. Because if you're on an x64 machine most of the time,
which is most modern machines,
right? So most of the time, your .NET exe, when you type the word .dotnet, that's going to be 64-bit. Reach out to doing 64-bit. You won't even see the x86 version. And so if you hit the wrong one, so we have tons, unfortunately, right now still of little spots like that. So like, oops. So we're trying to kind of back off from all of that and make a simpler world. So and people surprise us. We have the self-contained application thing. You know about that. So what that means is we put the runtime that you need into your application. You can even make it a single exe now. Gosh, isn't that great? We thought everybody would do that for WinForms. Okay. We thought that'd be the primary way people delivered. We were wrong. So it turns out people are sensitive to size and they didn't like doing that.
Well, also, there's people who have some offline job or scheduled task, which is a different console exe, but then they use the same libraries as the big app uses, and they just stick it in the same directory. And
So as a result, we found out, so on that one, we wound up with people saying, gosh, it's hard to find the runtime. If you're like, just imagine this is not a tech person. Mm-hmm. Perhaps, this is somebody who has a different job. They're whatever they do, which is great. They're a doctor or they're a lawyer or they're a truck driver. And they're trying to find the runtime on our, page as it was when this came to light. And so now I just want to tell everybody, if you do distribute WinForms applications, we actually have a very specific URL. So if you go to our website and you go to like right where you would download for the desktop, you can copy that URL and give it to people. So
and what's that URL?
That's the intention.
Or that website?
I'm going to have to find it for you. You go to hang on just a second. I'll get it for you as we talk. Okay. I always go to download.net first, .NET Core. And then once I get there, I then say, I want to do a runtime, .NET Core runtime. And then that's another one. And you can say, wait, I want to download. You have to, again, pick the right button. Oh, dear, this is doing exactly what
we'll make sure to include that in the show notes.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that because I did not go to the URL I thought I was going to. So I'm going to have to make sure I can find it. But we do have a nice, pretty URL for this. Anyway, that's, we've been getting smarter where we can, as fast as we can. But I know, and folks are welcome to talk to me about things that they wish we were doing better. I'm always glad to hear ideas, even when we can't act on them right away. Try to be polite, try to be patient. But other than that, we can, I like hearing people's feedback. We had this Twitter exchange over the weekend with some folks that didn't like that we took off 3.0.100 from on the update for update 4. So, that was very public. I'm okay with that. They understood that we do have most of our people that use Visual Studio are kind of glad we stopped filling up their machine. And we actually have an uninstall tool in the works for the old stuff, the stuff that we can't go back in time. And the fact you have a bunch of copies of 2.1 and 2.2, we can't go back to that. So we did write a tool, and I'll give you the link to that as well, so that we can get that out to people. Right now, it is in a very beta form. And the biggest problem is we have not got our install story straight on it. And so we don't want to give it to people as bad as the install is right now. So you can use it. You can play with it. We've even got docs started on it. But we're not putting it out yet as a full release because of the state of the installer.
Sure.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
And there's the link for that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. GitHub.com/.net/CLI-lab.
Right.
Awesome.
That's the CLI's team space to do things that when we first start on it, we don't know if we release. This was initially a intern project, and it has grown from there. And we think that we overall have gotten most of the UI right once you get it installed. But it's kind of sad. The installer, you download it, and if you're like me and you say just run, open when done, then it does this little flashy, I'm installing things up on the screen while it's working. It's a progress bar. But as soon as it's done, it just disappears and it never tells you it was successful. So that's not very nice. And that's what we need to, that's what we're concerned about. And that's the reason we haven't released yet. And people can tell us if we're a little too demanding when we say, do you really want to uninstall this? But if you make a mistake, you can always just repair your Visual Studio.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned VB and WinForms, and I want to ask a question because an informed opinion is really valuable. With the eye for productivity, and when an application just needs to be written, you've got with .NET Core, you've got the WinForms option and the WPF option. Now, both of them are going to be C#, but you got those two options. And just recently on the show, we talked about the new MSIX installer format for desktop and native applications. But in your opinion, with the investments and going forward, if someone's actually going to write a new Windows application, what forces would cause them to choose a new WinForms app, .NET Core, versus a WPF Core app?
So my opinion on that is a lot their background. So once you actually get the zen of WPF, you actually understand how to use WPF as it was intended to be used. You're separating your UI from your behaviors. You're doing some of that stuff. It's an extremely productive environment. The problem is it's not a productive environment on day one. So if you are like, I'm not quite there understanding the stuff yet. I just want to write something. I don't want to have to spend a lot of time learning about it. I think WinForms is a better choice, as long as the UI is good enough. And that's the other thing on WinForms is that once you get to a certain point of needing to be beautiful, you got to go to WPF to make it work well. I hope we're going to have a third one that goes into that pocket soon, which is going to be the Blazor work. I'm not actually involved in that, but I do hope we keep expanding our options for quick applications. WinForms has the designer. It's not completely, it's still a work in progress on .NET Core. It's coming along. For folks that are kind of mystified by why that's so hard, it's because the WinForms designer from the beginning of time was an in-process application, which means it was a .NET Framework application because Visual Studio is still a .NET Framework application. Well, .NET Framework application cannot play nice with .NET Core components in a designer because you actually run the components, you run controls, certain aspects of them in order to make the designer work. And so the scenario was that there was no way to make the current WinForms designer suddenly work for .NET Core applications. It had to be completely rewritten from the ground up. And that required a lot. There's work that's been asked of vendors and, to make some changes in terms of how some expectations worked to make a better designer along the way. And so that process has made, it's been difficult. We're nearing the end of that. It's getting pretty good now. But WPF became an out-of-process application quite a while ago. I'm not actually sure it was ever in process, but I know it's been out of process for years. And so the WPF designer, WPF had to do a lot of work to get ready and to get get controls converted and to do all the work to get WPF to have to run on .NET Core. But and that was about the same for WinForms and WPF, but it didn't have this extra layer of making a designer work that WinForms has carried through, and we're now near the end of that. So those teams have really done a great job, I think, moving those forward. When I first heard that, I was like, how is this going to work? And now, we were pretty much there, and we're diving off the same things, working on incorporating Xamarin now. And
Yes.
so that's what the team is working on, is moving forward on the announcements that we've made in terms of incorporating Xamarin and Mono and the things that they run, and looking to have a unified story going forward, which I believe is going to just help folks that are interested in any of this stuff. There's a lot that I look forward to us being able to, talk about what we've actually accomplished and the details of what that's going to look like. Everything's still in flux right now. It's great to be open source because I could talk about an awful lot of what we're doing, but it's so much in flux, and I'm actually not working on that except for some aspects of that. So I'll let people wait, and we'll be making ongoing announcements on that as we get previews ready to go.
Awesome.
Which is fun.
Well, there's a lot of great information, and we have all the URLs will be in the show notes. But is there any additional resources that come to mind if someone is making the .NET Core plunge and setting up their environment to do so, and they want to just dive in deeper?
Yeah, I think that the biggest advice I can give is that for most people, most of the time, just use the latest SDK, and it's a great place to be. And if you're using a shared server like a DevOps server that doesn't quite use the latest it has on it, because those sometimes move a little bit slower. And I think that's the big thing. It keeps you in a coherent environment because Visual Studio is a framework app, and we were running that in .NET Core. You can wind up with tasks and targets for MS Build that aren't tested with your copy of MS Build and things like that. There's just, we've come in looking at the problems that we encounter to believe that for most of the people, that's a really good place to be. Some people feel like they do need to select specific versions of the SDK with global.json for their build machines. And I can just tell you, there's no such thing as a reproducible build if you use Visual Studio. Someplace along that line between a Visual Studio build and your CI/CD server build, something in there isn't going to be aligned perfectly because, we're coming from a framework, and I think for most people that it's good to have that shift onto your CI/CD server, let your developers work in a coherent environment, and then have your CI/CD server, use the exact version that you want to. For folks that are, real serious about CI/CD. Now, there's people that don't agree with me on that, and that's fine, and we work to support them too. But we do. It's like there's always in your job that thing that nagging little this is how people can fall into quicksand, and when we try not to ever break MS Build, but it's an orchestrator. Its job is to do whatever you tell it to do.
Right.
And so because the tasks and targets have to evolve, nothing gets better inside the C#.NET world unless we get updates of tasks and targets. And there is always a non-zero risk of that running into a problem. And so when people use tasks and targets from a different MS Build than what their Visual Studio is running, it makes me very nervous. And so, we'll be moving forward trying to better support people in those scenarios. But we think global.json, if you really believe you need it, we're not going to take it away from you. In fact, we made it better. I guess just real quick, I know that we're nearing the end of our time, but global.json has some great new features in .NET Core 3.0, which is Visual Studio 2019 Update 3. We got great new features in global.json, including being able to set the bottom floor and say you don't want pre-releases, which were the two biggest asks. And we got the docs almost ready to go. We're so close. I've got one thing to check in the docs, and we'll have our docs upgraded on site for that. So if you look for global.json in Microsoft Docs, that will be updated any day now.
Nice.
And you can see all of our new features. So yeah.
Awesome. Wow, we went really deep. I really appreciate it.
I'm sorry.
No, this is great.
So fast.
This is great.
I realized I was going like 90 miles an hour. And
well, you deal with this all day. You operate on a daily basis at such a deeper level, and it's really good for our listeners to kind of hear that and be able to have some peek under the covers so they can have a better understanding of what's happening, because they're going to encounter some of these wrinkles, every now and then, and it's great to know what's happening under the covers. So now we really appreciate you coming on the show and setting some time aside for us. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been lots of fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.